Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We have some really great speakers for you today. Charlene Mackay, Senior Account Executive here at Eggplant, will be discussing the unique challenges that hospitals face when looking to automate their testing end-to-end. She'll also be giving you all some insight into Eggplant's experience in working with some of the largest healthcare systems in the United States. Following Charlene will be Randy Hessa. He'll be giving us a demonstration of Eggplant AI, as well as some of the cross-functional or end-to-end capabilities of Eggplant. And now, over to Charlene.
Thanks so much for joining today. As Lexi said, I work with all of Eggplant's health systems in the US. Day in and day out, I hear the same concerns over and over. Hospitals are worried about patient safety, recruiting and retaining the best staff, security, keeping costs down, and of course, compliance. I'm willing to bet everyone listening to me right now has joined for one of these reasons, but these categories aren't silos. Each one impacts the other. Patient safety, staffing, security, and compliance all impact cost. Patient safety is impacted by staffing, security, compliance, and if we're being honest, cost as well. Eggplant is so much more than a testing tool, and we're going to be talking today about how we can help with all of these concerns. Before I dive into that, I want to share with you a few of the customers who are using Eggplant within their health system. Eggplant can work with any software, so we have clients like NASA testing the Mars rover, to retail giants testing their point-of-sale terminals, and everything in between. But we have a division that only works with our healthcare customers, and that focus has gotten us to where we are today, with nearly 50 health systems using Eggplant. I'm sure everyone here today is familiar with Cerner. They're used by 27,000 hospitals and clinics, and they employ over 26,000 people. When I first started working with Cerner years ago, they had a few simple cases they needed help with. Basically, customers were reporting bugs and Cerner wasn't able to replicate them. They had built some internal tools, but they were too difficult for the teams to use. Even though Cerner is a technology company, the availability and cost of testers with the domain and technical expertise to use those tools was a constant problem. They needed a solution that manual testers could use, and Eggplant is that solution. Cerner chose Eggplant to be their in-house testing tool of choice because our solutions are easy to use for non-technical users, and we will work with any technology. The impact for Cerner has been huge. They've accelerated their delivery times by 23% and have been able to change the developer to tester ratio from 1 to 5 to 1 to 15, allowing Cerner to stay on top of regulations as they change. Now, obviously, hospitals are going to have some different challenges. When I started working with hospitals, and I'd like to think it wasn't that long ago, standalone software was commonplace. Now you have multiple different systems that interact with the EMR, from fetal monitors to vents to mobile devices and tablets. One notion we need to dispel right now is the idea that your EHR is commercial off-the-shelf software and can be treated the same way as Word or PowerPoint. It's highly customized to each health system and very often to each hospital within that system. So every update needs to be tested to ensure patient safety and security haven't been compromised. Due to staffing constraints, testing the EHR is often where software testing in the hospital starts and ends. But that means some very important elements aren't tested, including how the EHR interfaces with all of the downstream systems that interact with it. Most hospitals are using Citrix or one of its competitors to access their EHR. This is a huge hurdle for any software that needs to hook into the code to drive their tests. And finally, hospital software vendors are moving to quicker release cycles, which means your testing is going to need to be done with increasing frequency. Remember when I mentioned we're testing the Mars rover? We can test any software system with a user interface. Eggplant makes it easy for anyone to create tests. Since hospital software is rarely standalone anymore, we can ensure the entire patient journey in the hospital is properly documented and accessible by multiple systems and devices. And since cost is important, we can also verify that the patient has been accurately billed for every procedure. We can read from or write to a data file or Excel file, and we're 100% on-premise, so you never have to worry that we have access to sensitive patient information. and we will work seamlessly with Citrix or any of its competitors. And when there are new releases, it's extremely easy to update your tests. When I first begin speaking with customers, they start by asking things like, does Eggplant work with Cerner or Epic, Allscripts, Meditech, GE Centricity, eClinicalWorks, Practice Fusion, Athena Health, and so on? The answer is yes. We also work with ERP software like Lawson, PACS, blood bank software, patient portals on mobile devices, and the Citrix storefront. Eggplant is not only a test tool, it can also be used as a peer automation tool to, for example, add test patients to your system automatically before you start testing. You can have Eggplant automatically create a help desk ticket. You can set your environment for testing so it's at 0 state and ready to go when you're ready to test. It can handle any system alerts and send email or text messages to anyone that needs to be notified. You can get real timing so that you know how long a workflow takes over time. If you do an update and then suddenly it takes 60 seconds to do a workflow that was taking 5 seconds, you want to know that before your staff calls you. You can also do a technical dress rehearsal and do things like make sure that all of the printers are mapping to the correct workstations before you go live. You can also set up training environments to use, automatically apply security patches, and then do workflow testing to make sure everything works correctly, and test employee credentials. We can actually have Eggplant try to log into every system in the hospital to ensure former employees can no longer log into any system that they shouldn't have access to. Again, Eggplant can test all of these workflows and more. Just a quick review of what we can do. Eggplant interacts with your software exactly as you do. If you were sitting in front of a workstation watching Eggplant run a test, you would see Eggplant double-click on the hyperspace button, enter user credentials to log in, order labs, check test results, send messages, even use a barcode scanner and use Dragon voice dictation. You would not be able to tell a difference between Eggplant and a real user. So Eggplant can literally do anything your clinicians can do. Here's one example for those on the call who are using Dragon. Now, we don't actually have Dragon, but we do have an example using Alexa.
Alexa, can you tell me the share price of Amazon?
As of 12:13 p.m. Eastern, Amazon.com traded at $1,150.02, up 0.74% since previous close.
We read the dictated text from the screen, then compare it to what we expected the text to say. In this case, we ask Alexa to check the cost of Amazon. Then we use Eggplant to use an iPhone to look up the current price. Read it from the screen and compare the difference. In this case, the test failed because Alexa gave us the wrong price for Amazon stock. Shame on you, Alexa. So I've been talking about all the cool things we can do with Eggplant, but we're just getting to the exciting part. How we can use artificial intelligence and machine learning to turbocharge everything I just mentioned. And what do I mean by AI? It starts with your happy path workflows that are the minimum standard for testing, and then it expands your coverage from there to try variations of those workflows. It will also try variations you would never expect a user to try, even though they probably do. And when we find a bug, we try to come at it from every possible angle to help you pinpoint what's causing the error. We know where we have found bugs in the past, and we apply extra attention to those areas in the future. We can also predict how this release might impact user satisfaction. Maybe you added 4 new forms and some extra clicks, and all of a sudden, your doctors are unhappy that it's taking them an extra 3 minutes to complete a workflow. It's something we can let you know ahead of time. Let's talk about how AI actually works. You create a model of your application, and the purple boxes here roughly represent pages, and the gray buttons represent actions you can take against that page. The red arrows represent the flow from one page to another. So say your current happy path workflow is a woman comes into the ER and then goes to the labor and delivery, and then is transferred to postpartum, and then is discharged. The next iteration of the model can have a man coming in via Meditech for trauma and follow that workflow. We can also add unexpected events like code blues and network drops to the workflows at any time to see what impact that has. You can also test the negative test case, like what happens if you try to admit a 60-year-old man to labor and delivery? Or what if you're logged in as an LPN? Can you still prescribe medication? I should explain that we call your current test workflows happy path workflows because you're testing an extremely narrow part of the software to make sure you can go from A to B to C every time in that same order. And if you can do that, you're happy. But actual users travel very different paths that you're not currently testing. Real users are stressed and tired and behave in ways we cannot predict, but AI can. So you can try all of those different permutations of this workflow without having to script those variations. Instead of writing the code for each of those paths, you just write small snippets using Eggplant functional. Eggplant AI provides the assurance that every variation of a workflow has been tested and gives you a clear picture of what your test coverage is like with a quick glance at a heat map. We can find defects better than ever before. And AI can do those unpredictable workflows that someone might try when they're under stress. And I do want to mention that we can still do those standard workflows that you've been testing forever. We call them directed test cases, and you can tell AI to start with those first every time and then expand your coverage from there. And almost as important as expanding your test coverage, AI reduces your scripting time. So let's get into the reduction of scripting time because that's one of the benefits you'll see first. Manually defining test cases is very time consuming. Many hospitals have committees and a lot of people involved in writing and improving what a test case will look like, but they've been doing that to ensure that they're getting proper test coverage. With AI, when there are changes to the software, you only need to make a couple of additions to the model and let AI do the rest for you. Your scripting effort over time massively declines while your coverage increases. With AI, we can increase patient safety by increasing your test coverage beyond standard patient workflow or unit testing. I constantly hear about how EMR testing is taking too much time and resources. Yet at the same time, there's an acknowledgement that they wish they could do more testing. We should also talk about security testing. One of our customers is moving to monthly from quarterly security patches to avoid those malware ransomware attacks that are constantly in the news. This customer uses Eggplant to check that the security patch has been applied, and then uses Eggplant to test the workflows to ensure all systems are stable after the patch is applied. The security team used to have to come in during the middle of the night for this, but now they just get a text or an email if something fails, and only have to come in then. I know that automation intelligence and modeling sound complicated and like you're going to need a dozen test engineers to understand it. But the beauty of our solution is that you don't need to be a test engineer to create Eggplant test cases. Manual testers are very successful Eggplant users because our solutions are intuitive and test the user experience and not the code. Thanks so much for your time. I hope this was informative. I'm now going to turn it over to Randy Hessa, who will actually show you the tool in action.
Okay, today I'm going to show you how to build an AI model. Basically, when you start AI, you kind of get a blank slate like this with a little green box. And what I'll do is I'll be building actions and states of essentially of a workflow to kind of show you how modeling works. Now, the usually standard workflow I like to do is logins, but I'll show you some more as we kind of move on. So right now, as I build this model, just think of each gray box as a script, or there's a script behind it, and think of each purple box as a state, and we'll go into more detail what that means. All right, so let's start actually building the model here. So the first thing I'm going to do is right-click here, click New Action, and give this action a name. We'll call it Start. Okay. Then I'm going to right click here, say new state, right? So this is the purple box I was talking about. In this state, let's just call this, PV, and that will stand for either physical or virtual. So I'm going to right click here, new action. We'll call this physical. All right. And then right click here, new action. We'll call this maybe virtual. Okay. So basically, once this thing executes, you'll basically see everything kind of flow together. But for right now, all we're doing is building states and actions. And again, each action is every time an action is executed, there's a script behind the scenes that's executed, which we'll talk a little bit later. So we'll say new state. And we'll call this median. Right, in medium, we're going to say it's either going to be a thick client or maybe we'll test your Citrix. Okay, once we're there, new state, or sorry, new action. Oops. New action. Yeah, I keep doing that. New state, there we go. All right, so let's just say we have our EMR system, let's just say it has different versions of it. Not all hospitals have that, maybe different departments too, but in this case, we'll just do different versions. So we'll just say EMR versions. All right, and maybe in that version, I gotta stop doing that. Maybe we'll have 2015. Maybe we'll have 2017. Maybe we'll have 2018. All right, just different versions that we could launch. All right, once we have that, we'll create one more state here. And this will be our login types. Log on, oops. Types. And then maybe we would. And in our login types, maybe we'll have like a physician. Maybe a nurse. Maybe a clinician. And let's just do maybe a billing login. P9 billing. All right, cool. And once we're logged in, we're going to just verify that we're at the home screen and we're logged in with a certain credential. We'll call this home screen actually. All right, so basically we built all the action states. As I mentioned, each gray box is going to be a script behind it. So let's do all the linking right now. So verify, we're going to go to exit. And then from start, we're going to go to PV. Again, PV stands for physical or virtual. We're going to go here. Then from physical, we're going to go to medium. Then we're going to go to the EMR version. Then from the EMR version, we're going to go to login types. Login types, let's just move this a little bit so it's a little easier to see. There you go. Test. All right, go to home screen. All right, there we go. Okay, so when I press play now, what you'll do is you'll see this model kind of dim, and then each, as I mentioned, each gray box will essentially light up, and that's a script running in the background. So when I press play, let's see what the first thing we do. So we're going to go to Start, use a virtual machine on a thick client, 2017 with a physician, and then verify. All right, so that's one flow. So let's increase how many flows we can have. So iterations, I just upped it to 6. So start, physical, Citrix, 2018 with a nurse, and then verify that. Then again, start, physical this time, Citrix, 2015, billing, and then verify. So what we're doing is we're running through all the possible variances of workflows that a hospital has available to make sure that we have the most coverage, in this case for logins, as physically possible. And once we run through this model enough, basically what we'll do is we'll make sure that every single possible variant has been covered. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do code coverage or patient coverage. In this case, it's just login coverage for security. So that's what building the model is for, is trying to get as much coverage as possible. All right, another model that a lot of hospitals like to see is about like subscribing essentially medication. So we're going to build kind of a quick model of that one as well too. So we're going to right click here, again, new action, new action, start, right? And we're going to pretend we're already logged into the EMR system in this case. So we'll say new state, we'll call this login. New action, and for this one we'll just say physician, nurse, and we'll say new action or new state, excuse me, and then we're going to just call this let's just say patient age, and in this case we'll do maybe an adult, and a child. Oops. CH. Right. And then new state. And we'll call this medication. Right, and then we'll say new action, and maybe this one we'll do ibuprofen, ibuprofen, I think that's how you spell it. New action, we'll do aspirin. Let's do one more. God. I believe that's one of them. All right, then we'll do new state. Call this dosage. Maybe say this is 50 milligrams. Right, maybe 100. Just do 250 milligrams. And then new state. And we'll just call this verify. Or check. All right, so again, let's do all the mapping. So exit, and from here we'll do login. So in this case, what we're actually doing is checking which person can prescribe what medication, make sure that medication can be prescribed per that age and make sure that like we don't describe like a child maybe 250 dosage of maybe aspirin. So that's really what we're checking in this. So in this model here, what we're actually checking is not only the standard test cases, but also negative cases to make sure stuff does not work. Because sometimes we want workflows to make sure that they cannot be done. And it's not saying that we shouldn't, obviously we should check the ones that should be done, the most common workflows, but we also want to check the variances that are possible in the system and make sure the system errors out. Because God forbid we give like a child maybe like 250 of ibuprofen, right? That probably should not happen. So we really want to kind of check also other workflows or variances of those workflows to make sure that even certain workflows don't exist and certain ones do. So here we go. So again, and now I'm just going to decrease the time a little bit. I'll just leave it at 0.5 and run through some iterations. So again, when we run through this model for subscribing medication, we can see what can be done or what workflows are essentially possible for each type of login, each type of patient, whether it's adult or child, certain medications, certain dosage. We also want to make sure that maybe, like I said, we also want to make sure that certain dosage does not work as well. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll run through all the variances to make sure that we can or can't do certain ones. The last model I will show you today kind of really describes end-to-end testing. And this is what we call a patient journey. Basically, it's a model of all the possible variances of what a patient can do within a hospital system. Let's zoom out here. There we go. So basically, in this case, the patient comes in from registration, enters forms, goes into waiting room. See, there's a little thing called waiting room. And then the patient can go to many different departments, essentially, and have certain things. Now, in this model, it's a little bit different than the other ones you've seen. This one has something called global actions. Global actions are basically, in the healthcare world, they're known as essentially workflow interruptions, meaning if a patient was having an echocardiogram, during an echocardiogram, what happens if they had a network drop? So basically, these actions can be executed at any time. So again, echocardiogram, there's a network drop. What does that workflow look like? When the system comes back online, does it merge the patient correctly? Does it connect everything? Do we have to resend the images? Do we have to resend the sheets? Things of that nature. Or, God forbid, a code blue happens maybe within like an x-ray, right? So during an x-ray procedure, they code blue, right? Which means we got to go to crash cart and do all the fun stuff. But that being said, again, is that patient already in the system? Maybe they get an x-ray and they haven't been put in the system. Do we need to do a patient merge? Do we need to merge all the information? So these workflow interruptions allow us to kind of see more real world experiences. So let me run this model a little bit. And we'll do some iterations here. So I press play. Right, and the patient can obviously come in more than way registration. I just have it as registration. So patient comes in, enter the forms, all right, goes to surgery for kidney, goes back to inpatient, gets an ultrasound, nuclear med, goes back, right, outpatient, patient leaves. Pretty simple workflow. All right, let's check the next one. Comes in, echocardiogram. Actually, in this case, it was an echocardiogram network drop. Then, right, did you see it goes back to echocardiogram, and now we're going to like pharmacy. But during echocardiogram, there was a network drop, right? What does that look like, right? Have we actually did we actually do a test case for that? In the model world, we can, but when we deal with test cases, sometimes we can't check it. So again, the model is all about that coverage of any possible variances that can happen. Now, in this case, every time I actually run this model, we actually create a patient, and we also create random patients as well. So, in this case, we created Anthony Hall, 67 female. So again, random names and essentially random sex. But one of the things to talk about is if it's female, maybe you want to make sure that they can't go to the maternity department, right? Because obviously of certain things, but like certain criteria, they may or may not want to go to certain departments. And we want to check to make sure that's not possible as well. Now, again, most test cases actually write the most optimal path, right? The best case scenario. But we also do want to check the other possible scenarios to make sure they don't work. So this way we don't have to go back into the system and fix the patient. And again, creating a model kind of allows us to do all the variances of that. And here's a seriously sped up version of the open EMR demo that I usually do. As you can see, it's going through pretty quickly, but it also launches, not only does it do the EMR stuff, it also does launching .com as well. And that's those global variables we talked about earlier. So this is, like I said, just a really seriously sped up version, but this is someone test executing against, there's actually scripts that are written in the background that are executing code while this model is running. All right, so now I'm going to show you kind of cross-platform with the iPhone and OpenEMR. Again, OpenEMR is just my EMR system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in and then create a patient. And then what I'm going to do is once that patient's created, I'm going to log into the iPhone and then verify that patient. So right now I'm in the process of picking like dates and times for this patient, for Bruce Wayne specifically. And Social Security number. Right, so this is the script actually running. So on the right-hand side is the script. So basically the model kicked off the script, or you can run the script individually, up to you. But patient's created, Bruce Wayne. Now logging into the phone. And it likes to, I had to rotate it, so sometimes the window kind of moves, but just rotate to landscape mode. Logging into the iPhone. And there's our patient verification right there. So I'll read the data off the screen, just like a user would. There you go. And on the bottom right there, you can see the verification.
Thank you so much for those demonstrations, Randy. I think those were really insightful for our audience. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. If you'd like to get in touch or find out any more information, please visit our website, eggplant.io. If you happen to ask a question during this presentation, Charlene or Randy will get in touch with you personally regarding that answer that you're looking for, whether it's about the demo or any of the information we shared today. Again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next healthcare event.